Faith of interfaith in San Francisco. As the psalmist said, how good and pleasant it is for sisters and brothers to dwell together in unity. About 18 years ago, when I started this job, I found myself in the sheriff's office. I was not in any trouble. And I heard glowing reports of this young associated pastor at City Hope Church, who was doing some amazing work in the jails, and has gone on to found City Hope, which is just a few blocks from here. And I'm hoping you'll take just a moment to share what that is all about, and has passion in all the right places. Somebody who is a personal hero to me, but has been a friend and colleague ever since. And we are grateful to have you in the city, Reverend Paul Trudeau.
I had to ask how much time, because I want to tell a cool story to you, an interfaith story real quickly, and then lead us into a prayer. A few years back, when we were all coming out of our caves after COVID, I was at a barbecue and I met a guy and just talking, and eventually get to that point where you say, well, what do you do? You know, and it turned out to be Arik Luck from Temple Emmanuel. He's the cantor there, one of a couple. And next question was, what's a cantor? Because I don't know these things, and was educated. But we started to bond, and we realized their mitzvah class, which was huge, did not have space. And so we decided, what if we brought all the mitzvah students to City Hope and learned their Hebrew prayers and the beauty of the Jewish religion, and then went downstairs and we hosted a Jewish deli. So we've been doing that for 3 years. We're serving Reubens and turkey sandwiches and latkes, and I didn't even know what a latke was. It's been a beautiful thing. But the story I really want to tell you is that about a month ago, a guest came in, ate lunch with us. Oh, and matzo ball soup, of course. Ate lunch, and we realized that he was blind and deaf. And he came in with what we thought was a friend. And then I said to the person that was seated with him, Heidi, are you gonna walk your friend home? She goes, oh, I don't know him. And then I realized, well, where is he going? How will he get there? He could only speak a few words. And the words he spoke hit me in the heart, real hard. He said, Jewish church. That's all he said, Jewish church. I have no idea how he found us, this interfaith meal, this practice of faith and food together. And then we had to figure out how to get him home, if he had a home. Cantor Luck did this amazing, heroic thing. He started to call friends who knew sign language, but he couldn't see sign language. So he had to put his hand up to the man's hand and do sign language. Some of sign language is much more not just about your hands, right? You're touching your face and stuff. So I watched Cantor Luck taking this man's hand and putting it to his face. It was one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen. Eventually we had to call 911, and he was taken to a hospital so that he could get further services, because we believed that he was unhoused. But it was just this beautiful moment in San Francisco where faith comes together. And where does faith come together? It comes together where we need it the most. In these spaces, in these places in our city, and these beautiful people that are struggling. We're called to it, we all know that. So I just wanted to share that story with you, and I have a prayer that I would love to lead you in, so let us pray. God of light and love, may our interfaith community shine as a beacon of hope and compassion for our unhoused neighbors. May we find strength to lift those who are struggling on the streets of San Francisco. May our hearts overflow with empathy, our hands reach out in service, and our spirits be united in boundless love and kindness. May we gaze into the eyes of our neighbors and find the divine within them. And as we find your majesty within their spirits, may we be drawn closer to your love. and have our faith strengthened. Bless us as a city that we might go hand in hand together towards you. And may we walk in solidarity and faith, offering shelter, comfort, and unwavering hope to all. Amen.
Did you say a word about City Hope?
Oh yeah, City Hope. So 2015, we opened City Hope. Fred was my head pastor at the time. It was birth of City Church. And so we opened up with a movie and a meal, and we've been going strong with karaoke, bingo, table trivia. We partner with a lot of schools, a lot of corporate teams, and a lot of faith communities. 2016, we got an SRO hotel, and we're able to develop a 2-year sober living program. So we specifically look for people that have done that hard work the first 9 months and try to scale their success with them and journey with them to get them to maybe 3 years of stability so they can find permanent housing and better jobs and all that good stuff. And then about 2 years ago, we took over the barbecue restaurant that was below our feet because unfortunately that crushed my buddy's business during COVID. But we took it over, and now we have a free cafe that goes from 9 to 11, and we're doing lattes and homemade pastries. And so our whole philosophy is that we would provide radical hospitality that would bring about a divine and dignified transformation for everyone who comes through our doors. And we strongly believe that not only for our unhoused or marginally housed neighbors, we believe that for every San Franciscan that comes through our doors as we come together. We run off of volunteers, and volunteers are really, really important to our mission and vision because we believe we all need to transform and come together as a city. So that's kind of our heartbeat. Yeah, and we love our work. If you ever want to come by, I'd love to give you all a tour. Thank you.
You can see we've changed our orientation in terms of seating, at least, and there's a reason for it. We're not alone. We're live streaming, and we have, in addition to the folks at the table, we want to welcome those who are watching in the virtual space, so that's wonderful. I have the unique privilege and honor of introducing yet another friend and colleague who served on our board for 6 years as an associate minister at the Buddhist Church of San Francisco and was the chairman of our governance committee. 2 years ago, I think, I received a call from the Clinton Foundation. And I was a little skeptical of taking the call because you know how we tried to be apolitical. But they told me what they were doing, and the foundation was supporting training for clergy to be able to respond to substance abuse issues, realizing that the clergy were on the front lines and that they were seeing in families and in homes tragedies, if you will, that could be avoided. And so I contacted Elaine Donlin, and I said, what do you think? And so she connected with them, and what you are going to hear today is basically the fruit of a lot of labor. We are so grateful, Elaine, that you are here today because, and you come not only with a presentation, but also bearing gifts in this holiday season that I think can make a difference in people's lives. So without further ado, we welcome you back, and we look forward to your presentation. Thank you so much.
Perfect. Good morning.
Good morning.
Okay, yeah. It's like church. Good morning. Good morning. All right. Thank you. I want to thank Michael, of course, the San Francisco Interfaith Council for this opportunity, and each of you for bringing your curiosity and your heart of compassion to this topic. So as Michael mentioned, I was part of the Clinton Foundation. It's something that they started a while back called Empowering Faith Leaders. And the program was created to address one of the missing links in the opioid crisis, which they felt were the faith communities. So addiction education is not often a part of everyone's seminary. And in fact, there's a lot of stigma, shame, and silence. We just don't talk about it in our churches, our temples, our synagogues, our mosques. So Clinton Foundation had an idea to let's empower the faith leaders to have these discussions, to open their hearts and minds to the possibilities. There's an expression that was used in the first day of class that if you haven't found addiction in your family tree, you haven't shaken the tree hard enough. And I think that is so true, because once we started talking about this in our temple, people started coming forward and sharing their stories and seeking spiritual guidance. So this was our curriculum for the 10 months. You can see overdose prevention and naloxone training in the green line, addressing stigma and beyond the pulpit and beyond, and just a lot of evidence-based treatment for substance use disorders. 9 cities have been put through this program: Houston, Texas; Little Rock, Arkansas; Jacksonville, Florida; in Georgia, Atlanta, Athens, and Savannah; Los Angeles, San Francisco, New Jersey, Jersey City, New Jersey, and presently they're in Sacramento and San Diego. So it's a collaborative learning experience with diverse faith traditions on how we can address substance use disorders within our own communities of faith. So one of the questions that we all had to ask, and which was unique for each one of us, was, what does your faith tradition say about substance use disorder? What language is used in your scriptures or sacred texts? What language is used in your sermons, if at all? What resources are offered to those who are struggling with substance use disorder within your faith communities? And how do you address the stigma and shame and silence within your faith communities? And this is what, and just to let you know, this PowerPoint, I'm happy to send to you. So you don't have to take notes, you can just be present, and I have a contact at the end of this, so you can email me and I'll send it to you. So this is what each of us had to ask and to unpack for our own learning. And then when I presented this to my congregation, I filled all those in. I used the sacred scriptures for Buddhism. I used sacred texts within our own language in our tradition and address these issues. So this is how it begins, asking ourselves these questions honestly as faith leaders. The late, great American author Bell Hooks once said, "Rarely, if ever, are any of us healed in isolation. Healing is an act of communion." We need others. We heal in community. And this couldn't be more true with respect to prevention, treatment, and recovery of substance use disorder. And in our communities of faith, it can be vitally important, a place of support, education, and compassion. So that was the faith portion. We have a lot of work to do within our own faith traditions to unpack those questions and present those questions to our congregants. The science part, in a nutshell, understanding the opioid overdose epidemic. The rise in opioid overdose deaths can be outlined in 3 distinct waves. The 1990s, the wave began with increased prescribing of opioids like OxyContin. And it was touted as being less addictive than other drugs without any scientific evidence to support that claim, leading, of course, to the vast overprescription of this opioid and the rise in opioid addiction, overdose, and death. 2010, the medical industry began to realize the dangers of prescription opioids and began restricting them. Those addicted to opioids turned to illegal markets like heroin, triggering the second wave of overdose and death. Interesting to note that 2007 was the first lawsuit filed against Purdue Pharma by the state of Kentucky, which was ravaged by OxyContin death at the time. 2013, the third wave saw synthetic opioids like fentanyl grow more popular due to their potency and relative cheapness, sending overdose deaths skyrocketing. And that brings us where we are today. So provisional data from the CDC says there were an estimated 107,543 drug overdose deaths in the United States during 2023, so last year. A decrease, though, of 3%, which is great, we celebrate that, from the 111,029 deaths estimated in 2022. But note that 107,000 deaths, that's 29 deaths every day, 12 deaths every hour. That's mind-boggling. And while nationally we saw a 3% decrease, in 2023, San Francisco's worst year on record was the worst year on ever for overdose deaths. City forensics data estimated that a total of 810 people died from overdoses. It appears 2024 will be less deadly of a year in comparison. So far, as of November 19th, the stats showed there were 542 deaths. But more people have already died from overdoses than in the years before 2020. So we still have a lot of work to do. So what is an opioid? The word opioid is used to describe a group of drugs that act in the same place in the body to relieve pain. The place where these drugs work is called the opioid receptor. Opioid drugs may be sold legally as prescription or illegally on the streets, for example, heroin. In addition to helping relieve pain, these drugs have side effects like sleepiness and overdose. Toxic effects occur when there's an inability to wake the person up, or there's a decreased breathing, or breathing stops altogether. So examples of opioids. Some of you, most of us, have many of these medicines in our medicine cabinets because they're used to treat moderate and severe pain, like codeine with Tylenol number 3, fentanyl, which is prescription, but it's also homemade, hydrocodone, Vicodin, Dilaudid, Demerol, morphine, Oxycontin, Percocet, Percodan. Those are all prescribed and in our medicine cabinets. And when we honestly looked at ourselves, most of us do not dispose of these when we're healed from our pain, right? We save them for a rainy day, so when that back flares back up or something else happens. The illegal opioids include heroin, carfentanil, which is a tranquilizing agent for elephants. At the very bottom, we have a drug with the street name of pink. It's also called U4. It's a highly potent synthetic opioid that looks like a light pink powder, and it's often cut into counterfeit pills. Fentanyl, we hear a lot about fentanyl. It's a synthetic opioid up to 50 times stronger than heroin. Fentanyls are counterfeit pills that are designed to look exactly like real prescription drugs, or pills like Percocet, Vicodin, Xanax, but they contain fentanyl. So naloxone. Naloxone is a life-saving medication used to reverse an opioid overdose, including those from heroin, fentanyl, prescription opioid medications. Basically, naloxone knocks the opioid off the opioid receptor. There's 3 forms of naloxone that are available. The nasal spray, NARCAN, which everyone is receiving today, auto-injection, and injection. Naloxone is safe and easy to use, works almost immediately, and is not addictive. Naloxone has very few negative effects and has no effect if opioids are not in a person's system. So if someone is overdosing on something other than an opioid and you don't know what it is, you can't tell the difference, and you give them NARCAN, no effect whatsoever. No effect whatsoever. I was given it in a demonstration we were doing for, actually at the Zen Center, doing this presentation at the Zen Center, and they wanted to see it acted out if someone is having an overdose. And I pretend like I was a person. And my colleague actually sprayed it in my nostrils, and absolutely nothing happened, except I had a little post-nasal medicinal drip. That was it. So children can also overdose. When an opioid overdose is suspected in a child, naloxone can still be used. You cannot overdose a child with naloxone. You can save their life, however. So if you have your pain pills and you drop a pill, your grandkid can easily ingest it. Or if an older child or an older grandchild intentionally takes 1 or 2 from your medicine cabinet, everyone should have NARCAN in their home if they have opioids in their home. Everyone, I'll say it again, everyone should have NARCAN in their homes if they have opioids in their homes. Dogs. The National Geographic did an article about 3 years ago highlighting the impact of dog overdose. Now, all of you who have dogs and walk your dogs in the neighborhoods should be carrying NARCAN as well with your little poop bags. Because what does a dog do? A dog sniffs. They sniff a piece of foil. If they sniff a plastic bag, there's been a rise in dog overdose deaths. By the time your dog is laying there and you try to get that dog to a bed, the dog has died. So we encourage everyone that has dogs, walking their dogs, to carry NARCAN on them. For a dog, a large dog, you just you spray it up their nostril. If it's a smaller dog, into their mouth. So why carry naloxone? Anyone can carry naloxone. Anyone can give it to someone having an overdose and potentially save a life. Bystanders such as friends, family, co-workers, classmates, neighbors, church members, and non-healthcare providers can reverse an opioid overdose with naloxone. It's a life-saving emergency treatment medicine with no abuse potential and is not a controlled substance. Again, it's not a controlled, naloxone, NARCAN is not a controlled substance. You can buy it over the counter at Target, Walgreens, CVS, buy it online, and minors can carry it. NARCAN nasal spray is a brand of naloxone, and it comes in a spray device designed to deliver a 4 milligram dose into a single nostril. So when you receive this, if you use it, that's it, you throw it away. It's a one-time dose. This nasal spray needs no assembly, can be sprayed up one nostril by simply pushing the plunger. It looks like this, and that's it. Put up the nostril, push, and you've administered it. How to recognize an opioid overdose. Recognizing the signs of an overdose can save a life. Signs of an overdose may include small constricted pinpoint pupils, falling asleep or losing consciousness, slow or weak breathing or no breathing, choking or gurgling sounds, limp body, cold or clammy skin, or discolored skin, especially around the nails and the lips. So this is the training right here. In a nutshell, how to respond to an opioid overdose. It may be hard to tell if someone is experiencing an overdose. If you're not sure, treat it like an overdose. You could save a life. So the first thing, 3 things, all we need to do. First thing is identify the opioid overdose with verbal or physical stimulation, also called the knuckle test. Next slide will show you that. 2, give the NARCAN. Spray up their nostril. 3, call 911 for help. And then offer support to that person. If you can, lay them on their side to prevent choking if they throw up, reacting to the NARCAN. Stay with the person until 911 responders arrive. With a fentanyl overdose, 2 or more doses of naloxone may be needed to be given. So the first step, verbal and physical stimulation. We call it the knuckle test. You take your knuckles, first you call the person's name very loudly. If you don't know their name, you yell, wake up, wake up. If there's no response, you take your knuckles and you grind the knuckles into the person's sternum, the breastbone in the middle of the chest. This is incredibly painful and may bring them around. If not, you go on to the second step, which is you give them the NARCAN spray, and then you call 911 for help. So there's a slight note, naloxone can, but not always, cause withdrawal symptoms. Withdrawal symptoms may be unpleasant or uncomfortable, but they are not life-threatening. Symptoms may include nausea, vomiting, sweating, shaking, and feeling restless or irritable. If they are restless or irritable, you may want to stand back, but definitely stay with the person until emergency responders arrive, because they may need additional doses of naloxone. So why call 911? California now requires every ER in every hospital to utilize the California Bridge system. So California Bridge is an initiative of Bridge which works to provide emergency care and community health to create an integrated system that improves health and equity. So key elements of the California Bridge is immediate access to medication for addiction treatment, 2, navigation to ongoing care in the community, and 3, a culture of harm reduction. So please do call 911. There we go. So, laws and regulations. California law protects persons who give naloxone. So there's the California Good Samaritan law, which I think most people know. It's been around for a while. Someone's in an accident, you stop and help, you're not liable for any injuries that may occur in the course of emergency care. Governor Newsom, in an effort to get naloxone in everybody's hands, got the California Naloxone Liability Law passed. And it eliminates civil and criminal liability for us, it's number 2. Individuals that administer naloxone to someone suspected of experiencing an overdose after receiving it along with required training. This is the required training. 3 steps: verbal and physical stimulation. 2, give them the NARCAN. 3, call 911 and stay with them. Lay them on their side if possible. That's the training. You've all received it now. Yeah. So there's so many great resources. As faith leaders, there is no reason why we cannot confidently, with some authority, share this information with our congregants that are seeking it. So you can always log on to narcan.com, and that information is also right here on the pink sheets on your table. Every church or minister should be able to provide this resource to a congregant. This is something that we put together, and each city within, through the Clinton Foundation, puts this together. And it's just a really good resource guide, so much good information. Every church and temple, synagogue should have that available. Also, there's a QR code on here so that you can pass this on to your congregants so that they have this resource. We need to start talking about this and having resources available. Faith in harm reduction. Faith in harm reduction is on a mission to strengthen support for harm reduction messages, policies, and practices that uphold the divinity and dignity of all people. Faith in harm reduction has established itself as a national thought leader in ecumenical and interfaith circles on the subject of harm reduction and liberation with people who use drugs. It's chock full, this website is chock full of info on resources. They have a sermon series if you are pressed for how and when to discuss these issues. And there's community alliances. So I invite you to check out Faith in Harm Reduction as well. This is a corner of the lobby at our temple, Buddhist Church of San Francisco. On the left, you see the fire extinguisher. On the right is our AED, our defibrillator. And at the bottom is our overdose aid kit. It's full of NARCAN. It's unlocked. People can help themselves to it. But also, more importantly, in an emergency, if someone comes in and they are engaged in an overdose, we don't have to go find out who's the resident minister or who's the minister at the time, go to their office, go to their desk, pull out the NARCAN. It is right there in our lobby for everyone to see. It also fosters discussion. This was provided, this oak cabinet was provided by the Clinton Foundation to all of us speakers. You can buy it online, or you can make your own. Just something simple that says NARCAN available here, and just check it regularly to make sure it stays stocked. Also, you don't have to buy NARCAN. There are a lot of resources. I'm happy to help you with that, of where you can get free NARCAN. No one should have to buy NARCAN. So the first day of class, there was a lot of doom and gloom as we looked at the sheer number of deaths impacted by substance use disorder, especially with the opioid crisis. But it's critical to have and discuss hope. So hope, H stands for physical, emotional, and spiritual health of all of our congregants. O is opportunity. NARCAN saves lives. It gives one the opportunity to live. P is for power, the power of family, friends, programs, and faith communities, hopefully. E is education. Knowledge is life-saving. We can't look away. We can learn about substance use disorder in our families, in our communities of faith, without shame, without stigma, and without silence. And the how of the hope is we do it with honesty, we do it with open-mindedness, and a willingness, an open-heartedness to look, to share, and to discuss. I'm going to leave us with a quote from Bell Hooks. Love is an action, never simply a feeling. Love is an action, never simply a feeling. I think having NARCAN in our temples, churches, homes, offices, schools is an act of love. And carrying NARCAN on us is also an act of love. So I want to thank you again to the San Francisco Interfaith Council and to each of you for being here in community this morning. Here is edonlin1@yahoo.com. I'm happy to send the slide presentation. It's a PowerPoint. All you need to do is insert the front part, insert your what your religious tradition, how they look at and talk about support or not support. That was some of the things that came up in our discussions. Substance use disorder, compassion. That's it. Thank you so much. And I'll take a few questions if anyone has any.
Fran Moreland-Johns.
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes.
This is kind of a downer, because I walk all around here every day.
Mm-hmm.
I always see people who are passed out.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sorry to admit I never do anything. Once I did call 911 and I was appalled at the amount of time and money and people, and then the person refused to help.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a feeling of helplessness.
Mm-hmm.
I don't carry NARCAN because I would be terrified of approaching the wrong person.
Mm-hmm.
So my question, I'm sorry for the...
No, quite all right.
My question is how someone, an average, well, a little lady person,
Mm-hmm.
or anybody else, can be of any use in the face of the helplessness.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. That's a really good question. I think everyone has to do what they can within their capacity. There's not a one-size-fits-all. I don't expect everyone to be walking around the city, with their NARCAN, checking on every person on the street. Actually, where you're going to use this is in your neighborhood, in your job, in your family, because we don't think that's where it's happened. We immediately go to the street. But when you look at those sheer number of people that are dying, those are people that are just unhoused and struggling with substance use disorder. So this is why we need to talk about it in our temples, in our churches, in our synagogues, in our mosques, in our centers, because it's happening everywhere. And so carrying NARCAN for your family, carrying NARCAN or making sure it's available in your home if you have an opioid in your medicine cabinet is critical. So I don't expect you to walk through the streets checking on everyone. There are many of us that, I work for the San Francisco, I'm a night minister, and I'm so privileged and honored to do that work. And if I see someone that doesn't look like they're sleeping, blue fingers, or with someone, I'll ask, is that person breathing? Are they okay? Right? So again, I'm trained, I don't have a problem asking, but I don't expect people just to walk up to strangers, right? You do what you can within your capacity. did that answer?
Can I speak?
Yeah, Paul, please.
I've seen a lot of times when people are overdosing, they're with their friends
Right here.
or their.
A lot of times when people are overdosing, they're with their friends those that are actively living on our streets and deep in their addiction, they've given out NARCAN a lot. So you could be eyes and ears and say, hey, I think this person's dying. And I just see the community respond and save lives, and they'll have it on them too often. So I would just highlight that I've seen it administered I've administered it, but I've seen it administered by people that have probably done the drugs together. And there's a big, kind of a kerfuffle of people rushing towards that person. And so it might just be you being the eyes and ears and saying, hey, your friend doesn't look good. And then others might respond and administer it. If you have it on it, you might ask somebody to administer it.
Exactly. Yeah,
Yes.
thank you, Paul. Thank you.
Okay, I was just thinking, and again, it's not a question, it's more a comment. Some people are reluctant to call 911. I usually call 311 if I pass someone in the city who asks for help or who seems to need help, regardless of whether it seems to be an overdose or anything. I don't have NARCAN, however, that seems like a good idea. But anybody, if you call 311, I'm sure they are equipped. And you just say, there's a problem on the street, this is where it is, and they may say, well, we want you to call the police or something like that. I said, no, I really would like to give this to you, and they usually will take it on.
I think that's good advice. If 911 they usually send out the fire department first, fire department's equipped. When someone is dying of an overdose, every second counts. Call 911, call 311 if you want, whoever gets there first.
Whoever, yeah.
But 911, traditionally, it's for emergencies. 311 is not necessarily for emergency. And so I just want to make sure we get the critical care to the person that needs it. So thank you, good question. Anybody else? Are we good on?
We're good.
Thank you so much. Thank you for being here. So I'll be at the door handing out boxes of NARCAN. It's a box with a double two of these. So one for your home, one for your car, one for your bag. Two for your temple, however you want to do it. But you get 2 of them today.
And I would just ask, let's have a round of applause, please. You know, at the end of the program, there's usually a lot left on the table. Today, I would ask you to take everything with you because it is valuable material, number 1, for your congregations, and number 2, you'll also help us be doing a service to Good St. Mark's, as well as for the Interfaith Council. And I wanted to tell you, change is difficult for a lot of people, for this one. But I wanted to mention to you that we have a secret shopper in the person of Pastor Marcy Glass from Calvary Presbyterian, who texted me and said, Michael, this is great. She's watching on the live stream. This is the first time we've used a PowerPoint, and I believe we'll have a recording link, won't we? We will send that out and encourage you to share it with your congregants and folks who you think would benefit from it. We now come to a portion of the program which people really look forward to because each one of us has a faith journey. And our faith journeys are basically punctuated points in our lives, sometimes crises, in the best sense of the word, that have impacted our faith and put us on a direction and dictated what we believe and how we express our faith. Today's faith journey is going to be offered by the Reverend Canon Anna Rossi, precentor at Grace Episcopal Cathedral on Nob Hill, who I've known for 18 years. We started in the pews together there. And it gives me great joy to welcome Anna, and I'm looking forward to hearing your faith journey.
Thank you so much, Michael, for this invitation, and to all of you who are present today. There's nowhere to begin but in the beginning. So my life began in Canton, Ohio, where my parents had settled in a pretty unremarkable house in a barely middle-class neighborhood that was gathered around an ever-expanding regional trauma center. They had been married just over 10 months after my father had been excused from service as a Roman Catholic priest, refusing to be laicized or renounce his holy orders because he was convinced of his call to marriage. In the late 1970s in northeastern Ohio, this was a thing. But my parents were in love, and love made many things possible. Now that house would be refinished many times over and come to include myself, 4 biological siblings, 2 adopted siblings, an untold number of foster children, an aunt, my grandmother, foreign exchange students, neighbors, basically anyone. There was always an extra seat at the table. There was always more room at the inn. Passers-by in the grocery store or the flabbergasted teacher, there were many, said, oh, they're not really your family. But they were. My grandfather had been born in Rome. My dad was full-blooded Italian-American, and so were half of our neighbors. Our gardens overflowed with zucchini and eggplant. Thanksgiving required pasta. The volume was loud, the gestures broad, and you might weep at the dinner table simply because something was beautiful or something mattered. We were raised on guitar masses at a then moderate Roman Catholic college. An upbringing where Oscar Romero was a saint long before he could be submitted for canonization. Harry Chapin may have been his acolyte. And the gospel values of mercy and charity were practical and tangible. It was a deeply domestic faith which allowed for the institutional church to sometimes be wrong and still point to something greater. Now, when you ask a kid what they want to be when they grow up, the presumption is a career, a firefighter, a physician, a teacher. I wanted to be French. At the age of 5, I walked into my mother's kitchen and said, I want to move to Paris. Now, I have no idea to this day how I even knew that such a place existed, much less that I wanted to go there. I'd never seen my parents get on an airplane. To my knowledge, they had never left the country. So my mom, in her infinite wisdom, looked at me and said, I don't think we're going to be able to do that this year, but would you like to learn the language? And so my Montessori school's teacher's sister became my French tutor. I studied with her every week, and then when I got into 4th grade, I could take French in school. And then I took it in junior high, and I took it in high school. And I stumbled upon a postcard for the American University in Paris. Knowing absolutely nothing about this, I said, that's where I'm going. I graduated a year early, I got a scholarship, and I embarked to study French language and literature. I didn't have the language for this at the time, but it was a pilgrimage. At the end of 1 year, it was clear to me that 4 years would mean unsurmountable debt. And so I did what anyone in my position would do. I accepted the offer from a family friend to sleep on her couch in San Francisco. Now, at the time, the Bay Area had the highest concentration of French-speaking people in the United States. There was a French embassy downtown. I came here, I got a job in a French cafe. I started studying for the entrance exams for the French university system, which cost a fraction of the private American university that I had attended. I also found my way to St. Ignatius, a Jesuit parish at the University of San Francisco. I began singing in a choir there. I made a circle of friends, and I just started living my life. In Holy Week of that year, I received a notification from the universities that I had applied to that I had passed the language exam, but I was denied admission. That was the only goal I had had in my young life at that point, and I was bereft. But I looked around myself at Easter morning. I looked at this beautiful city and this life that was around me, and I said, I think I can stay. Now, I did end up going back to France one more time, and in that time I worked on a literary magazine. And it turned out that that was a really smart decision, smart accident, because it landed me back here during the dot-com boom. All this time, I continued as a practicing Catholic, but I found myself singing at every opportunity, including for a long time at 7th Avenue Presbyterian Church in the Inner Sunset, and in the late glory days at MCC in the Castro. Those also parlayed into freelance graphic design jobs, and so for a good stretch of time, I could temp and freelance and be basically untethered to a single employer. In March of 2003, my tides began to turn. The economy was weak. I was doing more temping than freelancing. And meanwhile, the Bush administration was starting a war in Iraq. I was working at the Bechtel building at the time, and I remember, I was a temp at Blue Shield, so I remember very keenly the day that that war began. We were watching the news unfold and leaving at 5:30 to go join the protests and recognizing that most of my colleagues were unbothered by what was taking place. And then the protesters came to the Bechtel building, and one of them harangued me about my employer. Now, he was wrong, but it was a cue to me that I needed to be working somewhere that was deeply aligned with my own values. A short time later, I was surfing Craigslist, and I found an ad posted by an unnamed church that needed someone to do print graphic design work and support a high-ranking female cleric. I read and I reread that job application, and I thought to myself, I'm pretty sure Grace Cathedral is the only place in town that could even write this ad. I think this job's for me. So I went home and I wrote the application and submitted it, and a couple of days later, my phone rang and I looked down at the caller ID, and it was Grace Cathedral. In June of 2003, I started my first job there. Those first years were fascinating, the beginning of rich friendships, mentorship, and also insight into the deeply cultural nature of prayer. I'd never felt more Italian than when I landed in an English organization. And it took years for the hymns of Holy Week to be sung in English and feel native on my tongue as opposed to the Latin. but I began to see myself as a pilgrim. On the first Monday of Advent in 2006, I walked and sat in the pews as the clergy were praying morning prayer in a side chapel. And I was half journaling and half writing a prayer. And what I knew was to pray for a different relationship with that place. I had no idea what I was praying for. And I continued as a practicing Catholic, and I kept singing. Palm Sunday 2007, I had a very powerful conversion experience and felt for the first time in my life separated from the Catholic Church. I continued to sing through Holy Week, but had conveniently left myself unscheduled at the Great Vigil of Easter. At the 11th hour, at the very last minute when I would have to make that decision, I decided to come to Grace Cathedral and found myself among my friends and colleagues gathered around a new fire. And I never really looked back. Every staff change brought some reconfiguration of duties, and so I found myself more and more connected to Sunday and to the work of the church. I felt the tug to go to graduate school, and I knew that finishing a BA was a prerequisite to doing that. A colleague had introduced me to the BA completion program at the California Institute of Integral Studies, and that brochure sat in a file for a while until the right moment came and I applied. The CIIS cohort model led to rich conversations, and the program let me take graduate courses in the philosophy, cosmology, and consciousness department. I got to study the life of the Buddha, read the Bhagavad Gita, poetry of Rumi, do research on Marian devotion in medieval Europe, among many other things. But after 6 consecutive semesters of full-time work and full-time school, I was exhausted. And I left my job at the cathedral to finish this degree. And to do that, I wrote a spiritual autobiography. It left me, as any good writing does, with more questions than answers. I had talked to one professor pretty seriously about becoming a journalist. And then slowly I came to this clarity that I would talk about absolutely anything. I would talk about anything except becoming a priest. And so I said to myself, oh, you don't have to become a priest. I don't have to become a priest, but I need to get committed to the conversation. In the great subtlety of the universe, I had joined the staff of a restaurant at its opening. It was duly called Credo. And it brought me into the orbit of a person who is now my wife, Amy. And she would tell me years later that after we first met, she knew of one topic of great significance to me, and she had to Google it: liturgy. I entered the ordination process as I entered this relationship, inheriting 2 young boys and the religious and cultural outlooks and practices of a Miami-born Jew of Egyptian extraction. I also entered into a relationship with someone that had dedicated her career as an immigration attorney to serving LGBTQ asylees and refugees. Amy got to know my inner life in a way that no one ever had. My need for silence, for long stretches of time of reading and study, and that absolute sanctity of a table that we both shared. At some point in my process, there was a test case of sorts. I was asked to lead an outreach ministry. So I began going into the San Francisco County jails most weeks to lead evening prayer. it helped me to establish a really meaningful network of relationships. And I don't know if you know this, but the people that I wrote about were Elaine and Paul and the San Francisco Night Ministry. It became an organizing principle of my life, and it helped me even organize how I structured my time in a job in financial services. I got special permission to leave early because I was going into the jails regardless. The slow pace of those years accelerated quite rapidly in 2015 when I began returning to Grace Cathedral to work in the liturgy department. I went off to the Claremont School of Theology and did an MA in theology, but I was there for 10 days and in Berkeley, Albany, where we lived, for 4 in a cycle. Completed that master's degree, we got married, both of our boys were bar mitzvahed, and on the eve of my ordination to the diaconate in 2018, I was looking at an interim job working for the Episcopal Diocese of California and a permanent position at the cathedral. Life had come full circle. In these last 6 years, so much of my journey has been about keeping my own inner lamp lit while attending to that larger lamp that is the liturgical life of Grace Cathedral and the network of relationships that we share as an interfaith community. So often, what begins as a personal practice then grows to influence my professional life. In those dark days of pandemic lockdown, when I was feeling particularly dim and a little bit adrift, I said to myself, I need to be able to hear my own voice. And so I knew that I couldn't take on a big practice, but I needed a practice, and I figured 17 syllables was something I could muster on a daily basis. And so I started writing haikus. And I started that in the midst of Epiphany, so in the season that's a little after Christmas and before Lent in our tradition. And then I continued that practice. I said I'm going to do that through Lent. And I got somewhere into Holy Week and I started hearing words in my inner ear that were a paraphrase of the Magnificat, the Song of Mary that we pray at evening prayer every day. And I thought to myself, that's a hymn. And I held that off until Easter week. And then I wrote it in Easter week. And every week of the Easter season, I wrote a new hymn that year. That launched a wonderful phase between my inner and outer lives meeting, and I continue from time to time to do that, and hope to do that in a more fulsome way in the not so distant future. That house where I grew up, in fact, the whole neighborhood where I grew up, is now a parking lot. And its many feats of restoration, the sanctuary for so many people, the untold number of meals is relegated to memory. And let's be honest that the possibilities in a 2-bedroom, 1-bath flat in San Francisco are a little bit different. But what remains of that, what is still alive of that, is a pretty sacred story. A commitment to claim people as family with whom I have no blood relationship. And to know how to set a table where there is always one more place. Thank